For the vast majority of the British public, these numbers are simply otherworldly. And, you know, I have to agree with the head of the TUC, grotesque, certainly in the current environment. These are actually companies that are members of what we call the FTSE 100. They're the 100 biggest companies listed on the London Stock Exchange. The vast majority of these countries, by the way, aren't British companies. They're from all over the world. They use London as a place to list their companies. Let's go through some of the details here. The numbers are really quite eye-watering. So we know from this think tank survey that FTSE 100 bosses, their pay is up 16% during 2022-2023. That's an increase of almost £500,000 on average. So that the median pay, trust me, it's a form of average, rose from 3.38 million in 2022 to 3.91 million in the following tax year. Median pay, it did drop to 2.64 million during the middle of lockdown.
So they had it hard for a while.
How did they possibly manage on £2.5 million a year? And this really does raise the question of whether or not we are, you know, one nation. You know the phrase "we are one nation." When there are such amazing extremes, let's have a look at the numbers for average earnings on the latest ONS data. They rose 7.8% across the UK population in April, May and June. But when you include inflation in those numbers, it was actually a reduction in real terms on average, even for those people that got that 7.8% average pay rise of 0.6%. So what does that all mean? It means that the average FTSE 100 CEO is paid 118 times more than the average worker, and that's up from 108 times in 2021.
At a time when they're calling for pay restraint.
At the time when the Bank of England is calling for pay restraint, the Bank of England governor himself on over £500,000 a year for sitting in meetings.
But let's just give the other part of the argument, because this is important. You touched on it. These are international companies that are quoted on the FTSE. I mean, obviously, they're looking for the best to actually lead the companies. And in the United States, they're saying, to actually compete with top bosses there, their median salary on the top companies on the S&P 500 is actually at $14.1 million a year, about 3 times the amount.
Yeah, these numbers are insane. These companies are, you know, they're listed companies. What does that mean? It means that they're owned by shareholders. Yeah. But the trouble is you have a kind of magic circle, a merry-go-round at the top of finance, where different executives of different big companies will sit on the remuneration committees of other companies and give each other massive pay rises at the expense of shareholders. Well, many of the shareholders, people, pension funds, insurance companies and ordinary people, small investors.
One of the things that Paul Novak suggested is that workers sit on these company boards to help with restraint and common sense.
It's a great argument, and I remember writing about it. Why don't we have workers on company boards to restrain executive pay when I did my economics A-level in 1987? This is, you know, this just goes round and round and round. And, you know, I'm a pretty, you know, pro-business, free market kind of chap. And I completely agree with the TUC. I think there should be worker representatives on company boards because big business does itself no favours. Pascal Soriot, the boss of pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca, he earned £15.3 million last year. Charles Woodburn, the CEO of BAE, a British company, £10.7 million. Bernard Looney of BP, £10 million. The head of Shell, £9.7 million. Look, don't get me wrong. If somebody creates a company from nothing and employs loads of people and then sells that company and they make double, triple-digit millions, chapeau to them. Because they've created a company, they've created wealth. These guys aren't creating companies. They're corporate politicians. They spend their careers climbing up the greasy pole of corporate politics. Are they really wealth creators? I don't think they are. I don't think they should be earning
the other aspect,
of
course, just to look at the bigger picture is they're not feeding into growth in the UK economy. That's still not happening.
That's partly because, I mean, this is a much bigger conversation, Mark, but the FTSE 100 isn't really the UK economy. Far more important, and where there is much more wage restraint, is what we call the FTSE 250, which is mainly UK companies, mainly still not small companies, but smaller, big companies,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But this debate's been going on for years and years. The only way we can restrain this is if shareholders actually exercise their rights to vote at company AGMs and stop these high pay rises, but they never do.